Ready.
Jonathan will be giving his speech about Woodstock.
The 60s was a period of time that inspired Americans to be different, to challenge the government and challenge the way they lived in society. In 1969, the decade was capped off by a 3-day festival event called Woodstock. Now, according to my survey, not all of you know what Woodstock was or why it was important, but it's particularly important for young people because we would have been the ones listening to this music or challenging the government at the time. Now, I've spent the last few weeks researching this topic, and I consider myself a huge fan of most of the bands that performed at Woodstock. What is important to know about Woodstock is some things that happened, like what it was and how the concert went down. Some important events in America that were happening at the time, and then how it affected our culture. Now, as you know, Woodstock was a concert festival that took place. It was supposed to take place from August 15th, 16th, and 17th, but it ran over into the 18th. Originally, it was supposed to take place in Woodstock, New York, but the townspeople there didn't feel comfortable with all the hippies like coming into town and stuff, so they passed a law that made you have a permit if you had an event for over 5,000 people, so the people couldn't have the concert there because they denied their permit. So they moved the event to Bethel, New York, because a small-time dairy farmer named Samuel Yasgur agreed to lend his property for Woodstock, and it was for a small sum of money. Now, originally, they only expected about 50,000 people to show up, but people just started pouring in from everywhere. They had to park out in the street and like walk there, and eventually over 150 to 200,000 people piled into the event. Now, everyone in the town expected it to be crazy, like to be drugged, like killings, like robbery and stuff, because of all the hippies, but the concert turned out to be perfectly fine. The only bad things that were happening was really just drug use with LSD and stuff, and there were only 3 reported deaths at Woodstock. 2 were from an overdose. And one supposedly, a guy fell asleep in a barrel of a haystack, and he got ran over by a tractor, but I think that's just an urban legend. Now, some of the important people that performed at Woodstock were Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, The Who, and Santana. Now, Jimi Hendrix capped off the festival, and he was the main headliner, and he performed a very controversial rendition of the national anthem where he played it on his guitar and he had his tongue out, and it was crazy. So, yeah. Now that you know a little bit about what happened at the festival, it's time to talk about some key events that were happening in America at the time. Now, the hippie movement was a movement that was taking place, and it inspired people to be different, grow their hair out, and they got a really bad rap for their slacker attitude and their heavy use of LSD, but they did preach peace and love. And also, their main protest at the time was the Vietnam War, and they were really against it. And at the time of Woodstock, Vietnam was happening. Now, some counter arguments to the protest of the war was that it was disrespectful to the soldiers that were participating in the war, but it's up to you to decide what you think is right. Now that you know about the things that were happening at the time, it's time to talk about its impact on our culture. Woodstock, a quote that I found on EagleTribune.com from Beth Barkwood, a Woodstock attendee, summed up what I thought everyone wanted to do at Woodstock. I had no inkling how legendary this would be, she said. It's loving the peace and the whole atmosphere of the 60s and early 70s. We weren't trying to save the country, save the world. And that was basically everybody's attitude. They just wanted a new way of thinking and a new way of life. And eventually the hippie movement died off because of their use of LSD and and things like the Manson murders and like the death of a lot of big artists at the time, like Jimi Hendrix and Jim Morrison. But their legacy will last forever. I hope that by me telling you some of the important things with Woodstock, like what happened, its impact on Americans, the things that were going on at the time, helped you understand. Now that I have a little time, I want to show you a short clip of Jimi performing the national anthem, which is maybe a minute.
Moment, brauchte Hendrix allerdings gar keine Worte, um seine Botschaft rüberzubringen. Seine Fassung der Musik des...
Basically the gist of it for time's sake. I want to stop it there. Now, in conclusion, Woodstock was important, even though the hippie movement died off because it preached us peace and love, and our culture should adopt these values as we move forward.
Take it. There you go. Sex, traffic. Don't traffic.
Yeah, it was like they had their own little commune.
And conclusion. Sex traffic.
Creeps me out. Like Jeffrey Dahmer has nothing on the internet, I swear. Man's freaking crazy.
He's here, I saw him on campus.
Skipper. This will be interesting.
What was his time?
And it's 5